Hello everyone, and welcome to Make 100 Games. I want to show you how you can build a kart racer in the style of Mario Kart. The goal is to have a relatively simple level in a cartoony Mario Kart-esque style that you can drive in. The source material we'll use for artistic inspiration will be the track Meadows as it appears in Mario Kart 8. In this first video, we will set up the basic scaffolding of our kart racer and build a very rough version of our track. We will use Unity's Karting Microgame as our foundation, as it provides an already functioning kart that we can drive around with. We will then use Unity's terrain tools to design the very first rough version of our track. The first version of our track won't be anything visually appealing, but it will give us a good idea of what our track will eventually look like and what it will feel like to drive around in. Alright, let's get started. Okay, so the first thing we're going to do is we're going to create a new project. Now, in order to use Unity's micro-karting game, you have to use a version such as 2021.3, so newer versions like version 6 will not have this karting microgame in it, at least not from what I could find. So for this, use a version like 2021.3, and then we can select here the karting microgame as our template, give it a name, give it a location to store in, and create the project. Now, if you see errors like this, just continue through them. Hit ignore. There are likely more modern templates available for you to use as a starting point, but I found that this karting microgame is a pretty solid start. Okay, once you've opened the karting microgame, it should look something like this. You can go ahead and close this, and we can just quickly give this a quick test run to make sure everything's set up correctly. All right, that looks good. We don't actually want to work on, or we don't want to build this kart racer with Unity 2021.3. So what we're going to do is we're going to migrate this to a newer version, in my case, Unity 6. To do this, we're going to close this. And in the Unity hub, we're going to look at our project here, or we're going to change the version here to the version that we want to migrate to, in this case, Unity 6, and hit open with 6. We confirm, and now we wait. And when we see dialogues like this, we again just click continue. Yes, we give consent. We click OK on this European material upgrade dialog. And we can also import some Text Mesh Pro essentials. We don't really need the examples and extras. And then once we have everything here, we should be good to go. We do get some Text Mesh Pro errors, but I think we can ignore these for now. They should go away when we actually build the project. So let's give it another test run here. Looking good. We have a good starting point for our karting game. So we're going to get rid of pretty much everything that we have in here except for the camera and the kart. So we're going to get rid of the background music. We're going to get rid of the game manager of all these dividers here. I mean, you can keep whatever you like, but in my case, I get rid of everything. I also don't want this direction light because it's at an angle here, at a pretty steep one, since it's got this kind of sunset vibe going on, and I don't really want this. We're also going to get rid of post-processing, the environment, checkpoints, and everything. So basically, we just have this player here, and we're going to also change the skybox. So we're going to go rendering, lighting, and in the environment, we're going to choose a different skybox, the default one, and we're going to add a direction light back in. And that's pretty much it. That's what we're going to go with for now. And so that our kart racer doesn't just fall down, we're going to add a terrain. So let's see here, to 3D terrain. And if we now hit play, we should be able to drive around in this. All right. Okay, so let's have a quick look at our source material, what we're basically using as our inspiration. So I mentioned that the Meadows track from Mario Kart 8 is kind of like what I'm going for here. So if we look at that here, a couple things stand out. We have a pretty wide track that's basically just dirt. So not like an actual road, but really a more organic, natural looking dirt path. We have these kind of soft rolling hills, And of course, we have these trees and the cows and everything. But I think the key things I want to focus on are the rolling hills and really kind of like this curved track. So going back to Unity, what we're going to be doing is we're going to be using the terrain tools from Unity to shape our track. And to do that, we're going to add a few assets that I will put in the description. And the first asset, let's go ahead and open the asset manager. In my case, I already have these downloaded because I've used these before, but you can find these for free on the asset store. So the first thing we're going to be using is the procedural terrain painter. So let's go ahead and import that. The next thing we're going to use is the Stamp It collection. And the first thing I want to do is I want to just kind of add some rolling hills to this terrain tile here. So to do that, we're going to select a terrain, go to the terrain editor. We're going to choose paint terrain. We're going to choose stamp. And here, from once you've added these assets, you should see some additional brushes here. We're going to choose, let's try this brush right here. We're going to increase the size of the brush so that it's bigger than our tile, or about as big as our tile. So of course, you're just going to have to play around with these values a little bit to get to the point where it looks the way you want it to look. I think that's pretty good here. We're going to give it a nice bit of height and increase the opacity. And you can already kind of see we add a little bit of noise here, but it's definitely not high enough. So I'm just going to hit Command Z here, and let's try to give it more height again. Now we can start seeing some hills. Let's go and see. I think that's not bad. It doesn't look like a lot, but remember our cart is quite small. But I think actually this really is not a whole lot. So I'm going to go ahead and Command Z that one more time and just increase the height a little more. And I think this is pretty good. So we have some basic noise here. We're going to go ahead and next what we want to do is we want to actually add some textures to this because it's very hard to work with. So we're going to go over here to actually we're going to stay where we are. We're going to choose paint texture. And now the second asset we added, the texture painter, is going to come in handy. We're going to add a component called the terrain painter. And in here, we're going to assign our active terrains. And we're going to add 2 layers. I also always forget which one comes first. I'm just going to go ahead and choose grass. And then you can immediately see that we no longer see this default checkered pattern, but we see the grass. We're going to add a second layer, dirt. And now what we can do, and this is where I'm always a bit confused. I think it's actually correct this way. What we're going to do is we're going to select the top layer, grass in this case. We're going to hit edit. We're going to scroll down and we're going to add a modifier. And in this case, it's going to be height. And what I'm going to do initially is I'm just going to reduce everything to 1. And now I can start playing with these values. Okay, and what we see already is actually that we have the wrong order of layers. So we see now that the grass is, like everything farther down is grass and everything higher up is dirt. I want it to be the opposite of that, because if you again look at the Mario Kart track, the things that are lower are dirt and the things that are higher are grass. So I'm going to go ahead and just switch the order of these. I'm going to select my dirt layer, make sure I'm in edit mode, scroll down and give it the height modifier. Let's reduce this to 1 as well. And just start playing with these values. And we can start seeing now that things farther down are dirt and things higher up are grass. That's exactly what I would like to have. It could be that we will have to change these values a little bit later on again, just to make sure that they align with what we want. But I think maybe something like this is a good start. So now that we have our basic kind of noise profile and we've set up some textures, it's time to figure out where we actually kind of want our track to be. And I usually just kind of pick an area that looks like it could be kind of like a nice area in the middle of the track, like a nice valley surrounded by some hills. And that's where I kind of end up shaping my track. So I think this right here could work quite all right. So I'm going to go ahead and grab my cart and drag it over here. So let's take the cart, move it over here. Check where we are. We're below the train. Move our guy up. And let's actually just drive around and see. Okay, so I think we're ready now to shape our basic track. So the shape I want to have for my track is basically kind of like a simple O shape going around here with a nice little hill area in the middle and surrounded by hills on the side. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to select my terrain. We're going to go back to this tab. We're going to go ahead and choose raise or lower terrain this time. And we're going to take one of these brushes up here. These are really nice brushes for creating gentle hills. We're going to reduce the size, however, quite a bit now. This is still quite large. Let me move the Kart Racer a little over to the side because we're going to make the center of our track and around here the outer part. So with my terrain selected again, I'm going to choose this brush. I'm going to reduce the size yet even a little more. And I'm going to start raising the terrain. So I can click multiple times to keep raising. I click once, it raises a little bit, and it's just kind of like this additive operation. And I'm just going to go ahead and shape or create some nice little hills here in the middle. And we're going to do the same and create some hills on the outside. We can, of course, also play around with the size of the brush and the intensity and the opacity, just to create some variance here as well. And if at any time you want to see what the terrain with the textures looks like with these new hills, you can scroll down here and click Force Repaint. And then actually we can see, okay, the values are not quite right yet. So let's lower this value again. So if we lower it, the dirt or the grass comes down farther. So I think this is okay for now. Let's just keep going and see. And as we can see, we already kind of have a basic shape. If we take a look at what this looks like from the perspective of our cart, we can already see that we're starting to get closer to an actual track. We can even give it a quick test run around to see if the size of it feels about right, if the track length is okay. I think track length is pretty good, but of course it's still very dull, so we're going to keep shaping this. In between, we can force repaint to get an updated look of what our track looks like. And of course, it's definitely a good idea to kind of add different sized hills to create a bit more variance so it doesn't look too repetitive. So let's give this another run. Definitely starting to look a lot more interesting. But still not a whole lot of fun to drive. It still feels very bland and flat. So actually one thing I do want to do is one thing that bothers me is that there's no shadows here. So we're going to go ahead and check our light source here and enable shadows. This will already give it a bit better of a sense of depth here so that we actually feel like we're driving on the terrain. But as I said, it's still all very flat. There's no real... Yeah, it's nothing really happening. It's just like as if I'm driving on a flat road. And that's not really how it is in a game like Mario Kart, right? It's very bumpy and uneven, and it creates a bit of unpredictability. So what I want to do now is I want to actually shape the road a bit. So if we go back to our Mario Kart picture here, we see that this curves down ever so slightly, and I kind of want to create this effect as well. So we're going to go back to our terrain, and what we're going to do now is we're going to keep this selected, but we're going to lower the terrain instead. So we're going to hold down our shift key, and you can see that it creates this kind of like recession here. And we're going to press in the terrain a bit. Not too much, really kind of gentle. Don't hold down the mouse button because it will end up digging a very deep trench very quickly. So we're just going to click our way through here and just kind of create a bit more of a valley. And this will help create a bit more of an unnatural or of an uneven terrain, which is what we want. And if we look at our preview here again, it's starting to look a little bit more interesting. We can also zoom in a little bit here. We see here there's still some stuff missing. And of course, also play with the width or the size of the brush to create a more narrow or a wider valley, depending on how you want to have it. And of course, also play with the opacity if you don't want the effect of the recession to be as, or the depression to be as strong. And of course, frequently play test as well to make sure that it feels and looks like the way you kind of want it to look. So let's give this another, actually before we do that, let's force repaint this. We can also see that maybe there's, it's still a bit too high. The dirt is coming up quite a bit higher than here. I mean, I'm going for more of a hilly look than this. I don't want it to be quite as flat as this, but I definitely don't want the dirt to come up too high. So let's go ahead and change these values again. Maybe even more. And that's starting to look a little better. So let's give this a quick drive here. Definitely better. Still a bit boring. So let's keep digging a bit. Here, this part is quite nice. I like this. This is a nice little valley. But here, definitely still a little boring. So let's keep working on this train shape a little bit more. So I'm going to go ahead and reduce the size of my brush. And let's see here. And also maybe increase the opacity ever so slightly. Now we see here we've actually gotten back to the flat part of the train, it seems. Okay, we definitely don't want that. So I'm going to go ahead and undo this part. We don't want to push down so hard that we get to the bottom of the train. So what we can do here is we can just raise the entire area here. So I'm just going to take my brush and I'm going to increase the size here, and I'm going to pull everything up. Basically increase everything so that it encompasses our entire track. We're going to pull this up. If we now force repaint, it should look a little different as well. Yep, okay. And we should be able to, of course, now we have to adjust this. Again, this value. We can go take our brush and we can reduce the size again. And we should now be able to dig down a little deeper before hitting the flat part of the terrain. And we should, of course, also not forget about our Kart Racer, which is like way down here now. And let's try this again. And you can see we can dig a lot farther down without hitting this, or without bottoming out. So we're going to keep digging here, make this just a little more interesting. The brush is still a little wide, so I'm going to reduce it a little more. I want it to be a bit narrower there. Don't worry about the unevenness just yet. We're going to fix that up just in just a little bit. All right, let's give this one another go here. I don't know if this is then almost a bit too narrow, but let's just go ahead and drive this track for a second. Definitely a lot more interesting. We got a couple of bumps and hills and valleys. Definitely a bit narrow here. Maybe that's okay, but well, I like that. That was fun. So this side is good from a width perspective. I like when it's a bit wider. I don't like when it's too narrow, especially if we have multiple racers later on. This will get a bit tricky if it's too narrow. So this part here is a bit too narrow for me. So I'm going to widen this part. So you can see this is a lot of trial and error. This is really just a matter of, experimenting, getting to know the tools, and figuring out what they can do for you. And of course, use the repaint to kind of see if you're achieving the effect that you want to achieve. Yeah, in this case, I'm not actually widening it all that much. So I'm going to try to lower the side of the hill here a bit more. And that starts to widen the track. Up. That's starting to look a little better. Again, I'm okay with a simple oval. If you want more variation, of course, than just an oval, then you can go ahead and do that. All right, so let's give this one another run, see if the width is okay. looking better. This is almost too much of a valley now. Yeah, it's definitely quite deep here, but we'll get to that in a second. And here it's quite bumpy. Here, this part's quite good. Okay, so what we're gonna do now, we have a basic shape. Some parts are a bit too, especially this part here is a bit too intense. I'm just gonna try and raise it a bit again. It's too high, so I'm gonna push it back down a little bit more again. I also notice that we're climbing a hill over here from this side to that side. I don't know if I want that, but yeah, this edge here is definitely a bit steep. But let's see, we're not done yet. So what we're gonna do next is we're actually gonna take this. We're gonna change the tool now to smooth height, and let's see if this can help us out a bit. Yeah, we're just gonna basically, now you can hold the mouse button clicked and you just kind of paint over it a bit, back and forth gently, and this will essentially kind of smoothen out the height a little bit. You can see here with the shadow. Of course, use this with caution because it again tends to flatten everything out a bit more. We don't want it to flatten out too much because otherwise we'll again be at the more boring road-like terrain, which I would like to avoid for this. We're just going to smoothen this out a little bit. At least from a bird's eye view, it looks pretty good. Here, it could definitely use a bit more. It is too high, but let's check if the steepness of these valleys has been, if that's a little better now. Just have a look here. This is looking pretty good. I quite like this section here. I think it's quite nice. This turn is quite okay here. Yeah, it's definitely better. I mean, here we have this grass part, so we have to push, maybe we have to push down a little bit, or we change to the parameters of the layer. But I think this is pretty good. I'm pretty happy with this. The one thing I want to do, I quite like when there's a couple of jumps and bumps here every now and again to kind of get some air off of. So what we're going to do is we're going to go ahead and add a couple of bumps. So what I like to do is I like to basically take an area that's a bit wider where I have a bit of room to maneuver. And I take I select this brush and I reduce the size quite a bit. And let's zoom in here. And we just add a couple of bumps. We'll have to play with the opacity a bit. So not smooth in height, but we're going to raise or lower the terrain. And let's see here, maybe this is a bit too high, so maybe the height will have to come down a little bit here. We're just going to add a couple of bumps. Let's see here. And we can run over this thing and just see if we can catch a bit of air. The point is not to disrupt your speed, but just to give you a little bump. Yep, just like that. That's great. Let's add another one. Maybe here. And maybe one more. Let's give this a go. The important thing is the track has to be fun to drive. That's maybe a bit too close. Maybe a bit too much here. Get rid of the second one. Let's just negate it. Smooth it out again. That other one is pretty fun though, I think. So let's see it one more time. Let me back up a little bit here. Yeah, that's fun. I like that. That's quite fun. Okay, let me just get to the other section one more time here. Over here where we have a bit of grass here, so I think maybe we can just adjust the parameter. Make it 12. Nope, too much. Make it, or too little actually. It's the wrong direction. Like maybe do like this. But now maybe the dirt's coming up a bit too high in some places. Let's give this a go. Definitely liking this bump. Oi. Bit of a physics engine issue there. It's kind of a long straightaway kind of thing. Dipping down into this turn. Yeah, quite good. I like it. I think this is a pretty good start to our track here. Okay, so let's do a quick recap of what we did. So we used Unity's karting microgame as a starting point for our kart racer. We then set up a terrain, added some hills, and shaped our track. We set up dirt and grass terrain layers, and we now basically have a drivable kart track. It doesn't look like much yet, but it's a solid foundation, and most importantly, it's pretty fun to drive on it. So in the next video, we will work on making this track look like a track out of Mario Kart. So be sure to subscribe if you don't want to miss next week's video, where we will start giving this track a nice cartoony look. And thanks for watching. See you next time.